The autoclave hissed in the corner of the supply room, steam curling against fluorescent lights that buzzed with a low, persistent hum. The smell of disinfectant hung thick in the air, sharp and chemical, mixing with the faint metallic tang of surgical instruments soaking in steel trays. Dr. Maya Reyes stood at the sink, third shift at Mercy General, hands moving in slow, methodical circles over a set of hemostats that had already been cleaned twice. The water ran cold. No one had fixed the heater in 6 weeks. No one cared enough to try. She was 34 years old, though most people in the hospital assumed she was younger. Something about the way she kept her head down, the way she never spoke unless spoken to. She wore her dark hair pulled back tight, no makeup, scrubs that were always a size too large. Invisible by design. Behind her, voices drifted through the half-open door. She's been here, 8 months, still acts like she doesn't know how things work. Foreign grad, probably got her degree off the internet. I heard she failed her boards twice before she passed. Maya's jaw tightened, but her hands stayed steady. Left circle, right circle, rinse, repeat. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. She set the hemostats on the drying rack with a soft metallic click and reached for the next tray. Precision. Always precision. Even when no one was watching. Especially when no one was watching. Dr. Richard Langford walked past the doorway without glancing in. He had a coffee in one hand, his phone in the other, and a stethoscope draped around his neck like a badge of authority. He was the kind of man who never learned anyone's name unless it appeared on a donor list. He didn't say good morning. He never did. Maya dried her hands on a rough paper towel and returned to her locker at the end of the hall. Inside, tucked beneath her coat, was a small leather notebook, edges frayed and cover worn smooth from years of handling. She pulled it out, opened it carefully. A list of names, written in faded ink. Some were crossed out. Others were circled. A few had dates beside them. She ran her thumb over one near the middle of the page. Corporal Danny Hale, June 14, 2013, Helmand Province. Her throat tightened. She closed the notebook and slid it back into her coat pocket, then shut the locker door with a quiet metallic thud. Reyes. She turned. Charge nurse Pam Cruz stood at the end of the hallway, clipboard in hand, expression flat and tired. She was 50-something, overworked, underpaid, and had long since stopped pretending to care about anyone who wasn't actively dying. Restock the ORs, 3rd floor, then check the crash carts on 4 and 5. Maya nodded. Yes, ma'am. Pam walked away without waiting for a response. Maya grabbed the supply cart from the storage closet and started pushing it down the long corridor toward the service elevator. The wheels squeaked with every rotation. One of them pulled slightly to the left. She compensated automatically, adjusting her angle without thinking. As she passed the emergency department, an alarm sounded from room 12, sharp. An insistent. Code blue. The crash team sprinted past her, white coats flying, shoes pounding against linoleum. She glanced through the open door as they flooded into the room. A man in his 60s lay on the gurney, skin gray, chest still. The monitor showed a flat line, then a jagged spike, then nothing. Ventricular fibrillation. The second-year resident stood frozen at the bedside, hands hovering over the defibrillator paddles like he had forgotten what they were for. Charge to 200, someone shouted. The resident fumbled with the controls. His hands were shaking. Maya's eyes tracked the monitor. Z-fib, shockable rhythm. But the paddles were positioned wrong, too low, too far lateral. The shock would diffuse, ineffective. She took one step toward the door. Clear, the resident stammered. The shock delivered. The patient's body jerked. The monitor didn't change. Maya's hand twitched toward the door handle. Again, an attending barked from the other side of the bed. But Maya had already turned away. Not her patient, not her place, not her right. She pushed the cart toward the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Behind her, the monitor beeped once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm. Got him, someone said, relief flooding their voice. Lucky, another muttered. Maya stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. She leaned against the back wall and exhaled slowly. Eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her hands were still steady, they always were. But her heart was pounding. The elevator stopped on 3. She pushed the cart out and began restocking the operating rooms, moving through the motions with quiet efficiency. Gauze, sutures, scalpels, clamps. Everything in its place, everything counted, everything correct. Dr. Langford appeared in the hallway, dictating notes into his phone. He glanced at her briefly, then away, as if she were part of the furniture. She finished the last OR and returned the cart to the supply closet. Her shift ended in 20 minutes. She would go home, sleep for 4 hours, and return to do it all again. She pulled her coat from her locker and checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls, just the way she liked it. As she walked toward the exit, she passed the staff lounge. Through the window, she could see a group of residents gathered around a table, laughing at something on someone's phone. One of them looked up and saw her. The laughter stopped. Maya kept walking. Outside, the air was cold and damp, the sky still dark. She unlocked her car, climbed inside, and sat for a moment in the silence. Her hand drifted to the notebook in her coat pocket. She didn't take it out. She just held it there, feeling the weight of it. Then she started the engine and drove home. The IV pump beeped 3 times in rapid succession. Maya's hand stopped mid-reach, fingers hovering over the medication drawer. Her breath caught in her throat. Beep, beep, beep. Not an IV pump, a sealed monitor. Dust in the air, thick and choking. The smell of burning fuel and copper. Someone screaming in the distance. She blinked hard. The supply room. Snapped back into focus. Sterile white walls, fluorescent lights, the hum of the ventilation system. Her fingers were white-knuckled around the edge of the metal shelf. She forced them open, took a slow breath through her nose, counted backward from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The notebook in her coat pocket felt heavier than it should. She finished loading the medication cart and pushed it into the hallway, moving with the same steady rhythm she always did. Head down, eyes forward, invisible. As she passed the orthopedic wing, a gurney rolled toward her, flanked by 2 paramedics and a nurse. A man in his 40s lay strapped to the board, face pale and twisted in pain. His right forearm was bent at an unnatural angle, bone visible through torn skin and drying blood. Compound fracture. Radius and ulna, both compromised. The attending orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Marcus Wedd, walked alongside the gurney, frowning at the chart in his hands. "We need a vascular consult," he muttered. "This is going to take hours. Where the hell is Chen?" "Still in surgery," the nurse replied. "Won't be out for another 2. Wedd cursed under his breath. "Then we wait. Get him stable and prepped. I'm not touching this until I know we won't lose the hand." Maya glanced at the wound as they passed. Radial artery intact, ulnar artery compromised, but collateral flow preserved through the interosseous branches. Temporary tourniquet holding. Reduction first, vascular repair second. 30 minutes, maybe 40 if the bone fragments were clean. She kept walking, but Dr. Webb had seen her pause. "You got an opinion, Reyes?" She stopped, turned slowly. "No, sir." He narrowed his eyes. "You were looking at the wound." "I was just passing through." "Right," he grunted and turned back to the gurney. "Keep moving." She nodded and continued down the hall, but his gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, something unreadable flickering across his face. Maya pushed the medication cart into the secure storage room and locked it behind her. Her shift was almost over. She just had to make it another hour. She walked to the staff locker room and sat on the bench, alone. The room smelled like cheap soap and stale coffee. Someone had left a half-eaten sandwich on top of the trash can. She pulled the notebook from her coat and opened it slowly, carefully, like it might fall apart in her hands. The names stared back at her. Corporal Danny Hale, Sergeant First Class Maria Ochoa, Private First Class Tyrell Grant, Staff Sergeant Kevin Broussard. Her thumb traced over the last name on the list, Lieutenant Colonel James Ritter, KIA, Kandahar Province, September 9, 2014. Her commanding officer, her mentor, the man who had taught her everything she knew about field trauma surgery. The man who had died because she hadn't been fast enough. She closed the notebook and pressed it against her chest, eyes shut tight. Her watch read 0647. She stood, tucked the notebook back into her coat, and left the locker room. The hospital was starting to wake up. Day shift nurses arriving, residents stumbling in with coffee. Fee cups and tired eyes. The sound of footsteps and voices echoing through the halls. Maya walked toward the exit, head down, hands in her pockets. As she passed the emergency department, she heard the sound of rotors overhead. A helicopter. She froze. The sound grew louder, closer, the deep, rhythmic thump of blades cutting through air. It rattled the windows, it vibrated through the floor. Her pulse spiked, her vision narrowed. She was back in the desert. Dust everywhere, heat like a furnace. The Black Hawk descending, rotors kicking up a storm of sand and debris. Someone was shouting her name. Captain Reyes, Captain Reyes, we need you now. She pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself. Breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The sound faded as the helicopter passed overhead, heading toward the rooftop helipad. Maya opened her eyes. Her hand was trembling. She clenched it into a fist and kept walking. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the sky beginning to lighten at the edges. She crossed the parking lot to her car, a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the rear bumper and a crack in the windshield. She unlocked the door and sat inside, staring at the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospital scheduler. Mandatory staff meeting, Friday at 1400. Attendance required. She deleted it without responding. Her hand drifted back to the notebook in her coat. She didn't take it out this time. She just rested her palm against it, feeling the worn leather beneath her fingers. Then she started the engine and drove home. Her apartment was a small one-bedroom on the east side of the city. 3rd floor, no elevator. The walls were beige. The furniture was secondhand. There were no pictures on the walls, no personal items on the shelves. Just a couch, a table, a bed, and a single framed photograph on the nightstand. Maya set her keys on the counter and walked to the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the photograph. 6 people in desert camouflage, standing in front of a mud brick compound. Rifles slung, faces streaked with dust and sweat. Smiling. She was in the center, younger, thinner, hair cropped short beneath her patrol cap. Corporal Hale stood to her right, Sergeant Ochoa to her left. Lieutenant Colonel Ritter stood behind them, one hand on Maya's shoulder. She stared at the photo for a long time. Then she set it back on the nightstand, lay down on the bed fully clothed, and closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it brought the dreams. The ambulance bay doors slammed open at 03:17 in the morning. 2 paramedics sprinted through, a gurney rattling between them. A man in his mid-50s lay strapped to the backboard, face gray and slick with sweat. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. His eyes were half open, pupils dilated and unfocused. MVA, T-bone collision at highway speeds, the lead paramedic shouted as they burst into the emergency department. Flail chest on the left side, suspected cardiac contusion, blood pressure dropping fast. We've been bagging him for the last 8 minutes. He ER attending, Dr. Elliot Voss, moved in quickly, snapping on gloves as he walked. He was in his early 40s, competent but cautious, the kind of doctor who followed protocols to the letter. Get him into Trauma 1, Voss barked. I want a chest x-ray, EKG, and 2 large-bore IVs. Someone page cardiothoracic. The team moved as one, wheeling the gurney through the double doors and into the brightly lit trauma bay. Monitors beeped. Hands moved fast, pulling equipment. Cutting away clothing, attaching leads. Maya had been restocking a supply cart near the ambulance bay when the doors flew open. She glanced up, eyes tracking the gurney as it rolled past. Something was wrong. The patient's breathing wasn't just shallow, it was paradoxical. The left side of his chest was caving inward with each attempted breath, while the right side expanded. Flailed chest, yes, but worse. Tension pneumothorax. She looked at the monitor as they passed. Oxygen saturation dropping. 89%, 86%. The gurney disappeared into Trauma 1. Maya set down the supply cart and followed at a distance, stopping just outside the doorway. Inside, controlled chaos. Start a second line. Someone get me the intubation kit. Sats at 82. Where's the Dan chest tube tray? Dr. Voss stood at the head of the bed, fumbling with the laryngoscope. His hands were steady, but his eyes were uncertain. He was thinking too much, hesitating. The patient's lips were turning blue. Sats at 78, a nurse called out. Maya stepped closer to the doorway. Her hand gripped the edge of the frame. The monitor alarmed. 74%. The patient's eyes rolled back. His body began to go limp. Maya stepped inside. Needle decompression, she said quietly. No one heard her. Needle decompression, she repeated, louder this time. Dr. Voss looked up, eyes wide. What? Maya moved toward the supply tray without waiting for permission. She grabbed a 14-gauge angiocatheter, tore open the sterile packaging. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, she said, voice calm and flat. He's got a tension pneumothorax. You decompress now or he arrests in 30 seconds. Voss stared at her, frozen. Who the hell are you? Sats at 70, the nurse said, voice rising. Maya didn't answer. She stepped to the patient's left side, eyes scanning his chest. She palpated the landmarks with 2 fingers, found the second rib just below the clavicle, wiped the site with a single alcohol swab. Wait, Voss started. Maya inserted the needle at a 90-degree angle, smooth and fast. A sharp hiss of air escaped, loud and immediate. The patient's chest expanded. His color began to shift from blue-gray to pale pink. The monitor beeped. Oxygen saturation ticked upward. 76, 79, 82. The room went silent. Maya withdrew the needle, placed a gloved hand over the insertion site, and looked at the nearest nurse. Chest tube kit, now. The nurse handed it to Dr. Moss, who took it with trembling hands. He stared at Maya for a long moment, then turned back to the patient and began prepping for the chest tube insertion. His movements were mechanical, automatic. The tube went in. The patient's breathing stabilized further. Monitor, 91%, 94, 97. Maya stepped back, peeling off her gloves. She dropped them in the biohazard bin and turned toward the door. Where did you learn that? Voss asked, voice low. She didn't answer. She walked out of the trauma bay and into the hallway. Behind her, the team stood in stunned silence. One of the paramedics, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with close-cropped hair and a thin scar along his jawline, was still standing near the doorway. He had been watching the whole thing. He frowned, eyes narrowing. He knew that face. He had seen her before. Not here, somewhere else, somewhere hot and far away. Hey, he called after her. Maya kept walking. Hey, wait! She stopped but didn't turn around. A paramedic stepped closer, tilting his head, studying her profile. I know you, he said slowly. Maya's jaw tightened. You don't. Yeah, I do. She turned to face him, expression blank. You're mistaken. He shook his head. No, I'm not. His eyes widened slightly, recognition clicking into place. You're Captain Reyes. The hallway seemed to shrink. Maya's face remained neutral, but something shifted in her posture. Tighter, smaller, guarded. You've got the wrong person, she said quietly. No. His voice was firm now, certain. Kandahar, 2014. I was Army, attached to a route clearance unit. IED took out our lead vehicle. You and your team pulled me out of a burning Humvee. Maya said nothing. You kept talking to me the whole way to the helicopter, he continued, voice softer now. You told me your name, Captain Maya Reyes, 75th Ranger Regiment, combat medic. Dr. Voss stepped out of the trauma bay, still wearing blood-stained gloves. 2 nurses stopped in the hallway, listening. Maya's hands were steady, but her breathing had changed. Slower, controlled. That was a long time ago, she said flatly. The paramedic's eyes were bright, almost emotional. You saved my life. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the stairwell. Captain Reyes, he called after her. She didn't stop. The door to the stairwell closed behind her with a hollow metallic thud. In the hallway, Dr. Voss stood frozen, staring at the space where she had been. Rangers, he repeated slowly, disbelief thick in his voice. One of the nurses pulled out her phone. By the time the sun rose, the entire hospital knew. Maya sat in her car in the hospital parking lot. Engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed. 15 missed calls, 23 text messages. She didn't open any of them. The sun was starting to rise, pale light spilling across the asphalt. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she hadn't been able to leave. Not yet. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. The paramedic's voice echoed in her mind. You're Captain Reyes. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 6 years. Her phone buzzed. Buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She powered it off and slipped it into her pocket. The hospital loomed in her rearview mirror, windows glowing against the dim morning sky. She could see people moving inside, shadows passing behind glass. They were talking about her. She knew they were. She started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, driving slowly through empty streets. The city was still asleep. Traffic lights blinked yellow at deserted intersections. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a small park on the west side of town, a place she came to when the walls of her apartment felt too close. She parked near a bench overlooking a pond and sat there, watching the water ripple in the breeze. Her hand drifted to the notebook in her coat pocket. She pulled it out, opened it. The names stared back at her, written in her own handwriting. Some in pen, some in pencil. All of them ghosts. She traced her finger over one near the bottom. Private First Class Tyrell Grant, age 22. Killed by an IED outside Kandahar. She had been 10 feet away when it happened. She closed the notebook and tucked it back into her coat. Her phone was still off. She left it that way. She sat on the bench for hours, watching the sun climb higher, until the cold finally drove her back to her car. When she returned to the hospital that evening for her next shift, everything had changed. The whispers started the moment she walked through the door. People stared, some pointed. A few turned away quickly when she looked in their direction. She kept her head down and walked to the locker room. Inside, 3 nurses stood near the sinks, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw her. "Is it true?" one of them asked. Maya didn't respond. She opened her locker and pulled out her scrubs. "They're saying you were special forces," another nurse said, voice hushed. "Rangers," the first one corrected. "Not special forces, but close." Maya changed without looking at them and left the locker room. The hallway felt different now, heavier. Eyes followed her everywhere she went. She made her way to the supply room and started her usual tasks: restocking, cleaning, counting inventory. Dr. Langford appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Reyes." She looked up. "My office. Now." She set down the tray she was holding and followed him down the hall. His office was small and cluttered, papers stacked on every surface. He closed the door behind her and gestured to a chair. She remained standing. "Sit," he said. She sat. He leaned against his desk, studying her with narrowed eyes. "You lied on your application." "No, sir, I didn't." "You omitted your military service." "That's the same thing." "No, sir, it's not." His jaw tightened. "You performed a procedure last night, without supervision, without clearance, without authorization. I saved a man's life. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Langford's face flushed. "The point is that you don't get to decide when to break protocol. You don't get to act like you're above the rules just because you used to wear a uniform." Maya's expression didn't change. "The man would have died." "That's speculation." "No, sir, it's a fact." Langford pushed off the desk and stepped closer. "You're suspended. Effective immediately, pending a full review by the hospital board." Maya stood slowly. "Understood. Leave your badge and ID at the front desk." She nodded once and turned toward the door. "Reyes." She stopped. Langford's voice was quieter now, almost uncertain. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" She looked back at him. "Because I wanted to be a doctor, not a soldier." She walked out and closed the door behind her. The hallway was full of people now. Day shift had arrived. Residents, attendings, nurses, all of them watching. Maya walked toward the exit, head high, shoulders back. As she passed the emergency department, she saw Dr. Voss standing near the nurses' station. He looked at her, opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. She kept walking. Near the front entrance, the paramedic from the night before stood waiting. He straightened when he saw her. "Captain." She stopped. "I didn't mean to." He hesitated. "I didn't mean to cause problems for you." "You didn't," she said quietly. He stepped closer, voice low. "For what it's worth, you saved my life twice now. Once in Kandahar, once last night, when you showed the rest of us how it's done." She met his eyes. "What's your name?" "Hernandez, Sergeant First Class, retired." She nodded slowly. "Take care of yourself, Sergeant." "You too, Captain." She turned and walked out into the morning light. The air was cool and sharp. She crossed the parking lot to her car and climbed inside. Her phone was still off. She left it that way. She drove home slowly, taking side streets, avoiding traffic. When she reached her apartment, she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it. Bare walls, minimal furniture, the photograph on the nightstand. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it. 6 faces, 6 names. 4 of them were gone. She picked up the photograph and held it in both hands. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She had turned it back on without realizing. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. One new message, unknown number. She opened it. Captain Reyes, we need to talk. This is not a request. No signature, no explanation. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she set the phone on the nightstand, lay down fully clothed, and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She just waited. Because she knew what was coming. She had always known. The sound woke her just after dawn. Low, heavy, close. Rotors. Maya's eyes snapped open. She sat up, heart pounding, every nerve suddenly alive. The sound grew louder. A deep, rhythmic thump that rattled the windows and shook the walls. She crossed to the window and looked out. A Black Hawk was descending toward the hospital parking lot, 3 blocks away. Rotors chopping the air into sharp, deliberate beats. Her breath caught. She grabbed her coat and was out the door in 30 seconds. By the time she reached the hospital, the helicopter had already landed in the main lot. 4 men stood near it, dressed in civilian tactical gear, rifles slung low, movements precise and unhurried. They weren't trying to blend in. They didn't need to. Delta Force. Maya stopped at the edge of the lot, 50 feet away. The lead operator scanned the area, then locked eyes on her. He walked toward her with measured, deliberate steps. Mid-40s, lean, hard-faced. The kind of man who had seen too much and said too little. He stopped 3 feet away and pulled off his sunglasses. Captain Reyes. Her throat tightened. I'm not active duty. You are today. I'm done. I've been done for 6 years. He didn't blink. There's a situation in Stuttgart. Medical transport plane went down 40 clicks outside Ramstein. We've got 6 critical casualties inbound to Landstuhl in 2 hours. The trauma team there just lost 2 surgeons in the crash. You're the closest level 1 combat surgeon we've got in accessible range. I'm not in theater. I'm not cleared. I'm not. You're breathing, he said flatly. That makes you the best option we have. Behind him, the other 3 operators stood in a loose perimeter, scanning the area, hands near their weapons. They weren't asking, they were informing. Maya looked past them, toward the hospital entrance. Dr. Langford stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face pale. Dr. Voss was beside him. A small crowd had gathered behind them, nurses and residents staring through the glass. The operator stepped closer. You took an oath, Captain. We're calling it in. Maya's hands curled into fists. I don't have clearance. I don't have credentials. I don't have. You have a pulse and a skill set, he interrupted. That's all we need. She looked at the helicopter. The rotors were still spinning, slow and steady, waiting. How long? She asked quietly. Wheels up in 5 minutes. I need 10. You've got 3. She turned and walked toward the hospital. Langford stepped forward as she approached. You're suspended. You're not allowed. She walked past him without slowing. Reyes, stop. She kept moving. Inside, the hallway was tacked. Everyone was watching. Phones out. Whispers spreading like wildfire. She went straight to the locker room, grabbed her go bag from the bottom of her locker, the one she hadn't opened in 6 years. It was still packed. Trauma shears, tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, a small kit of emergency meds. She slung it over her shoulder and walked back out. Dr. Voss stepped in front of her. Maya, she stopped. Is it true? He asked quietly. All of it? She met his eyes. Yes, he nodded slowly. Then go. She walked past him, through the crowd and out into the parking lot. The operator was waiting. 2 minutes, Captain. She climbed into the Black Hawk. The interior smelled like oil and metal and old sweat. One of the operators handed her a headset. She put it on. The lead operator climbed in beside her and tapped the pilot's shoulder. Let's move. The rotors accelerated. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, nose tilting forward. As it gained altitude, Maya looked down. The hospital shrank below them. She could see people standing in the parking lot, staring up. Dr. Langford, Dr. Voss, Hernandez, others she didn't recognize. Then they were above the buildings, above the city, heading east. The operator leaned toward her, voice crackling through the headset. You good? She didn't answer. Captain? I'm good, she said. He nodded and settled back. The flight took 40 minutes. No one spoke. The only sound was the rotor wash and the hum of the engine. Maya stared out the window, hands folded in her lap, mind already shifting into a different mode, a different version of herself. Captain Reyes, not Dr. Reyes. Not the woman who restocked supplies and kept her head down. The woman who had run field trauma operations in Kandahar, who had saved lives under fire, who had lost people she loved and kept working anyway. That woman, the one she had tried to bury. When they landed at Ramstein, a transport vehicle was waiting. They loaded in without ceremony and drove fast toward the medical facility. Inside, chaos. The trauma bay was packed, nurses shouting, doctors moving fast, blood on the floor. The sharp smell of disinfectant mixing with the metallic tang of fresh injuries. A colonel in uniform saw the operators enter and walked over quickly. "Who's the surgeon?" The lead operator gestured to Maya. "Captain Reyes, 75th Rangers. 8 years field trauma experience." The colonel looked at her, eyes narrowing. "You're not on the roster." "She is now," the operator said. The colonel hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Trauma Bay 3. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, perforated bowel, patients crashing. We're out of hands." Maya dropped her bag and moved. She stepped into Trauma Bay 3. A young soldier lay on the table, mid-20s, face pale, abdomen distended, blood pooled beneath him. The monitor showed a blood pressure of 70/40 and dropping. A nurse looked up, eyes wide. "We're losing him." Maya moved to the head of the bed, gloved hands already assessing. 2 units O-neg, now. Get me a laparotomy kit and call for an OR. OR's full. Then we do it here, Maya said, voice calm and absolute. Move. The team moved. Maya worked fast. Incision, clamps, suction. Her hands remembered everything. Every step, every motion. The bleeding slowed. The blood pressure stabilized. 15 minutes later, the patient was stable enough to transport. Maya stepped back, pulled off her gloves, and took a breath. The colonel stood in the doorway, watching. "You just saved that kid's life," he said quietly. Maya didn't respond. She walked to the sink, washed her hands, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Captain Reyes stared back. She had tried to leave her behind, but some things, once learned, could never be forgotten. Maya stood in a small office at Ramstein Air Base, still wearing blood-streaked scrubs. The colonel sat across from her, hands folded on the desk. Behind him, the lead operator from Delta leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We need to talk about your discharge, ... the colonel said. Maya's jaw tightened. "That was 6 years ago." "I know. I read the file." He slid a folder across the desk. Maya didn't touch it. "Kandahar, September 2014. You refused a direct order to evacuate during an ambush. Your commanding officer deemed the casualties unsalvageable. You disagreed." Maya said nothing. "You stayed behind with 2 medics and extracted 4 wounded soldiers under sustained enemy fire. You performed field surgery in an active combat zone for 3 hours. All 4 survived." He paused. "But 2 members of your team didn't. Corporal Daniel Hale and Sergeant Maria Ochoa. They were killed covering your position." Maya's hands curled into fists in her lap. The colonel leaned forward. "Your commanding officer blamed you for their deaths, said you acted recklessly, disobeyed orders, put the entire unit at risk. He pushed for a court-martial. You took a general discharge under pressure instead." "I know what happened," Maya said quietly. "I was there." "So was I," the colonel said. She looked up. "I was the battalion surgeon. I reviewed every after-action report from that day, and I'm telling you now what I should have told you then." His voice was steady, certain. "You made the right call. Those 4 soldiers are alive because of you. Hale and Ochoa knew the risks. They made their choice, just like you made yours." Maya's throat tightened. She didn't speak. The operator pushed off the wall and stepped forward. "The discharge was bullshit, Captain. Everyone knew it. But your CO had friends in high places, so you got buried." "Why are you telling me this now?" Maya asked. "Because we need you," the colonel said. "Not just today. Long term. The Army's building a new program. Embedded combat medics in civilian trauma centers. Training the next generation of field surgeons. We want you to run it." Maya shook her head slowly. "I'm not a soldier anymore." "You never stopped being one," the operator said. "You just changed uniforms." She looked at him. "I left for a reason." "What reason?" the colonel asked. Maya was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, voice low and measured. "Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Hale, Ochoa, every person I couldn't save. Every mistake I made. Every second I was too slow. She exhaled slowly. I thought if I left, if I became someone else, maybe it would stop. Did it? The colonel asked. No, he nodded. It never does. But that's not why you left. She looked at him. You left because you were tired of being blamed for doing the right thing. You left because the system punished you for saving lives. You left because you couldn't be a soldier and a human being at the same time. Maya's hands trembled slightly. She pressed them flat against her thighs. I didn't want to be a hero, she said quietly. I just wanted to help people. That's all I ever wanted. Then come back, the colonel said. Not as a soldier, as a doctor, as a teacher, as someone who knows what it means to make impossible choices and live with them. Maya stood slowly. I need time. You've got 24 hours. Thought. The operator said, then we need an answer. She walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. The program, she said. Would I have authority over training protocols, hiring, curriculum? The colonel nodded. Complete authority. And if I disagree with a superior officer's assessment? Then you disagree. Your call stands. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked out. She found an empty hallway and sat on a bench near a window overlooking the flight line. Planes taxied in the distance. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the tarmac. She pulled out her phone and turned it on. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages. She scrolled through them. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize. A few were from the hospital. One was from Dr. Voss. She opened his message. Whatever they're asking you to do, I hope you say yes. We need people like you. The world needs people like you. She closed the message and stared at the screen. Then she opened her contacts and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 6 years. Sergeant First Class Tyrell Grant's mother. She had written the number down after his funeral, but had never found the courage to dial it. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she put the phone away. Not yet. She pulled out the notebook instead, opened it to the last page. Lieutenant Colonel James Ritter, her commanding officer, her mentor, the man who had taught her everything, the man who had died 3 weeks after Kandahar, not in combat, but in a helicopter crash during a routine transport. She had never forgiven herself for not being there. She stared at his name for a long time. Then she picked up a pen and wrote something beneath it. You were right. I can't run from this. I can only carry it forward. She closed the notebook, tucked it back into her coat, and stood. The operator was waiting at the end of the hall. Decision? He asked. I need to go back to the hospital first, she said. There's someone I need to talk to. He nodded. We'll get you a ride. No, she said. I'll drive myself. He studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. 24 hours, Captain. I know. She walked past him, out into the evening air, and headed toward the parking lot. The drive back took 3 hours. She didn't turn on the radio. She just drove, hands steady on the wheel, mind quiet for the first time in years. When she pulled into the hospital parking lot, it was nearly midnight. The emergency department was quiet. A few nurses at the station, one resident filling out charts. Dr. Voss was sitting in the break room, a cold cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up when she walked in. You came back, he said. I came back, she confirmed. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. They offered you something, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Are you going to take it? She looked at him. I don't know yet. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how we treated you, for not seeing who you really were. You saw a foreign grad who kept her head down. Maya. Aya said, that's who I wanted you to see. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because I was tired of being defined by what I survived. Voss leaned back in his chair. And now? Now I don't know if I can run from it anymore. He nodded. Then don't. She stood. Thank you. For what? For asking. She walked out, through the empty halls, and back to her car. 24 hours, Maya returned to Mercy General 3 days later. The hospital felt different, quieter. The usual hum of indifference had been replaced by something sharper, more aware. People noticed her now. They stepped aside when she walked past. They nodded. Some even said good morning. She hated it. She walked into the administrative wing and found Dr. Langford's office. The door was open. He sat behind his desk, reading something on his computer screen. She knocked once. He looked up, and his expression shifted. Not quite fear. Not quite respect. Something in between. Reyes. Dr. Langford. He gestured to the chair. She remained standing. I came to clear out my locker, she said. He leaned back in his chair. You don't have to. She frowned. I was suspended. The board met yesterday. They reviewed your case. He paused. The suspension has been lifted. You're reinstated. Full privileges. Maya didn't move. Why? Because we made a mistake, he said simply. You saved a man's life. You acted with competence and precision under pressure. That's what we're supposed to do here. She stared at him. He cleared his throat. I also owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing who you were. I assumed incompetence when I should have recognized skill. That was wrong. Maya's jaw tightened. I don't need an apology. Maybe not, but you're getting one anyway. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. I'm not staying. His face fell slightly. I see. I've been offered a position, training combat medics and civilian trauma surgeons. It's what I should have been doing all along. Langford nodded slowly. Then I'm glad you found it. She turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, you run a good hospital. You just need to trust your people more. Noted, he said quietly. She walked out. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Dr. Voss. Maya, he said, slightly out of breath. I was looking for you. I'm heading out. I know, but before you go. He gestured down the hall. There's something you should see. She followed him to the emergency department. The trauma bay had been reorganized. New equipment lined the walls. A large whiteboard displayed updated protocols for needle decompression, tourniquet application, and airway management under duress. At the bottom, in bold letters, Reyes Protocol, approved for immediate implementation. Maya stared at it. We updated the training manual, Voss said. Every resident, every nurse, every attending will be trained in field expedient trauma response. No more hesitation. No more second guessing. He looked at her. Because of you. She didn't know what to say. A young resident approached, nervous. Dr. Reyes. Reyes? I'm Sarah Chen. Second year. I just wanted to say. She hesitated. I watched what you did the other night. I've never seen anything like it. It changed the way I think about medicine. Maya met her eyes. Good. Don't forget it. The resident nodded and walked away. Voss smiled slightly. You're already teaching. I didn't mean to. The best teachers never do. They stood in silence for a moment. When do you leave? Voss asked. Tomorrow morning. Where are you going? Fort Bragg. Then wherever they need me. He extended his hand. Good luck, Captain. She shook it. Doctor is fine. Not anymore, he said. You're both now, and that's not a bad thing. She nodded and walked toward the exit. Hernandez was waiting near the ambulance bay, leaning against his rig. He straightened when he saw her. Captain. Sergeant. He smiled. Heard you're heading back. Something like that. Good. They need people like you. He paused. We all do. She looked at him. You saved yourself, Hernandez. I just kept you awake. You did more than that. His voice was firm. You gave me a reason to stay awake. She didn't respond. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Hale and Ochoa. They'd be proud of you. Her breath caught. You don't know that, she said quietly. Yeah, I do. He tapped his chest. Because I'm still here. And so are 4 other guys who wouldn't be if you hadn't stayed. She nodded once, throat tight. Take care of yourself, Sergeant. You too, Captain. She walked out into the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting the hospital in long amber light. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool air, letting the weight of the past few days settle. Her phone buzzed. A message from the colonel. Answer? She typed back. Yes. 3 dots appeared. Then, welcome back, Captain. Report to Bragg Monday. 0800. Bring your notebook. She stared at the last sentence. He knew. Of course he knew. She slipped the phone into her pocket and walked to her car. Inside, she sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the hospital one last time. Then she pulled out the notebook and opened it. The names were still there. They always would be. But now, beneath them, she wrote something new. This is for you, all of you. I won't waste what you gave me. She closed the notebook, started the engine, and drove away. Behind her, the hospital grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the road stretched open and clear. For the first time in 6 years, Maya Reyes didn't look back. She looked forward, and she drove. 2 years later, The Reyes Center for Integrated Trauma Response stood on the north end of Fort Bragg, a clean, modern building with wide windows and a helipad on the roof. Inside, the air smelled like fresh paint and new equipment. The walls were lined with photographs, faces of soldiers and civilians, medics and doctors, all of them learning side by side. Maya stood in the main training bay, arms crossed, watching 20 students work through a mass casualty simulation. Half were active duty military, half were civilian emergency responders. They moved together without hesitation, without hierarchy, hands steady under pressure. A young army medic called out from one station. Tension pneumo, left side. Landmarks confirmed. Decompressing now. Maya walked over, observed. The needle went in clean, angled correctly. Air hissed out. The mannequin's simulated vitals stabilized. Good, she said. Next time, verbalize your findings before you move. Let your team know what you're seeing. Yes, ma'am. She moved to the next station. A civilian paramedic was applying a tourniquet to a simulated leg wound, hands shaking slightly. Breathe, Maya said quietly. You know this. You've done it 50 times. The paramedic exhaled, adjusted his grip, and pulled the tourniquet tight. Click, twist, lock. Time, Maya called out. 42 seconds, someone answered. Good. Next. She walked through the rest of the bay, correcting, guiding, never raising her voice. When the simulation ended, she gathered the group in the center of the room. You did well today, she said. But well isn't good enough when someone's dying in front of you. You need to be faster, calmer, more precise. That comes from repetition, from trust, from knowing that the person next to you will do their job so you can do yours. She paused. Military or civilian, it doesn't matter in the field. What matters is competence. What matters is that you don't freeze when it counts. What matters is that you bring someone home alive. The group nodded. Dismissed. We'll debrief in 30 minutes. They filed out, talking quietly among themselves. Maya walked to her office, a small room at the end of the hall. The walls were bare except for one framed photograph, the same one that had sat on her nightstand for 6 years. 6 people in desert camouflage, faces streaked with dust, smiling. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Emails from 3 different hospitals requesting training rotations. A message from the colonel about expanding the program to Europe. A note from Dr. Voss asking if she'd be willing to guest lecture at Mercy General next month. She answered them one by one, methodical and efficient. A knock at the door. Come in. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped inside. She was no longer a nervous second-year resident. She was confident now, sharper, her movements deliberate. She had been one of the first civilian participants in the program. Dr. Reyes, the new cohort arrives Monday. 18 military, 16 civilian. I've reviewed their files. They're solid. Good. Make sure they know the expectations before they start. No egos, no shortcuts, no excuses. Understood. Chen hesitated. There's someone here to see you. He says he's an old friend. Maya frowned. Who? He didn't give a name, just said you'd remember him. Maya stood and followed Chen into the hallway. Near the entrance, a man in his early 60s stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at the photographs on the wall. He wore a worn Army jacket and a faded baseball cap. When he turned, Maya recognized him immediately. Sergeant Major Colin Briggs, her first platoon sergeant in Afghanistan. Afghanistan. The man who had taught her how to stay calm when everything was falling apart. Briggs, she said quietly. He smiled. Captain. She crossed the room and shook his hand. It's Major now. I heard. Congratulations. What are you doing here? Came to see what you built. He gestured around the room. Heard a lot of good things. Thought I'd see it for myself. She studied his face. He looked older, tired, but his eyes were still sharp. How long has it been? She asked. 10 years, give or take. She nodded slowly. You want the tour? If you've got time. She led him through the building, showing him the training bays, the simulation labs, the classrooms. He asked questions. She answered them. They talked like old comrades, easy and familiar. When they reached her office, he stopped in front of the photograph on the wall. I remember that day, he said quietly. 2 weeks before Kandahar. Maya stood beside him. Yeah. Hale was a good kid. Ochoa too. They were. Briggs looked at her. You did right by them, Captain. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but you did. Her throat tightened. She didn't speak. He turned back to the photograph. Ritter told me once that you were the best combat medic he'd ever seen. Said you had a gift for keeping people alive when they shouldn't be. He was exaggerating. No, he wasn't. Briggs met her eyes. And now you're teaching other people to do the same thing. That's a legacy, Captain. That's something that lasts. Maya looked at the photograph, at the faces, at the names she carried. I hope so, she said quietly. Briggs nodded and stepped toward the door. I won't keep you. I just wanted to see it, and to tell you I'm proud of you. Thank you, Sergeant Major. He paused in the doorway. One more thing. Hale's little brother just graduated Ranger School. He's assigned to 2nd Battalion. I told him about you. He wants to meet you someday. Maya's breath caught. Danny's brother? Yeah. Name's Eric. 22 years old. Looks just like him. She nodded slowly. Tell him I'd be honored. Briggs smiled. Will do. He walked out and Maya stood alone in her office. She pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd carried for years, and opened it. The names were still there. They always would be. But now there were new names too. Students she'd trained, lives they'd saved. A growing list of people who were alive because someone had refused to give up. She picked up a pen and wrote at the bottom of the page. Eric Hale, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Danny's brother. Carry him forward. She closed the notebook and set it on her desk. Then she stood, walked back into the training bay, and got to work. Because the work never stopped. Because there were always more lives to save. Because that was what she did. Not as a soldier, not as a hero. Just as someone who refused to let people die when she could save them. And that was enough. Outside, the sun set over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Inside, the lights stayed on, and the work continued, always.